Now I know we talk about property as being a passive income, and once you've bought a property and once you've set it all up, refurbished it, handed it over to a managing agent, then your role does become a lot more passive if your managing agents are good. And if your tenants are nice, and you may then be in a position where if you've got a nice tenant who just pays the rent and they stay there for 10 years, then that is pretty much as passive as it gets. Now there's going to be bits and pieces to do. You've still got to do your tax returns, you've still got to make sure that the managing agents are doing the management in the right way, and that they're doing things like, keeping the gas safety checks up to date and all that kind of stuff. But by and large, you can sit back and let them get on with it. But I think there's a big difference between that and being completely passive. And one of the things which worries me a little bit is when people try to become successful property investors, but they don't actually do very much, particularly when it comes to just scrolling through Rightmove from the comfort of their kitchen table, which you've heard me say before. But stick with me, because I have a really good example of what can happen if we're not actively involved, particularly in finding the property. Because, as I say, the passive bit actually kicks in after we've bought the property, but in actually finding the property, very often we need to be very active. Now, of course, if you're going to use a deal packager or a property sourcer, you can be a little less active, but I'd still want to do my due diligence both on the deal sourcer and on the property. So there's actually quite a lot of work to do there. But I've been reminded of all of this because I've been out looking at properties in an area which I know reasonably well as an area, but not particularly well as an investment area. And if you think back to the videos which I did about valuing property, I said that sometimes, if not often, it'll be the case that we can see a property and we want to get an idea of what the property is worth today and what it's going to be worth after the refurb, but there's not very much comparable evidence. And I've been looking around this particular area looking for comparable evidence, and there is not very much comparable evidence. And it's interesting because one of the properties I went to see is on the market at £130,000, and it's a 3-bedroomed ex-council house which needs to be refurbished. Now, because there's a lack of sales in the area, I've got no idea really what the value actually is. I don't know whether £130,000 is cheap or whether £130,000 as an asking price is expensive. I have my own views from gut feel. I'll come to that in a moment. I then went to see another property which is probably about a quarter of a mile away, so it's reasonably comparable. This is a more modern semi-detached property, only 2 bedrooms, the first one's 3 bedrooms. It looks probably worse than it is because there's a tenant in the property at the moment who's a bit scruffy, but once they get all of their stuff out and once the property's cleaned up, it'll probably need a lick of paint, but it doesn't need that much of a refurb, I wouldn't have thought. That's on the market at £120,000. So when you think of that, it makes the first one at £130,000, notwithstanding the fact that it's 3-bed, probably feel a little bit too expensive. I then went to see a third property, which is probably about a quarter of a mile away again, which is a typical Edwardian mid-terraced house. Now this is 3 bedrooms, it's on the market at £120,000, and this particular property has been done up beautifully by the current owner. The current owner uses it as a buy-to-let. There's a tenant in the property who's about to leave over the next couple of weeks. There's no refurb to do. Now, it's not usually the type of property which I would be interested in buying because I like doing the refurb, but I thought it was interesting just comparing and contrasting the 3 properties just to get an idea of what the value of the properties are. Because when I saw the first property, the ex-council house at 130, my experience of the area wasn't great, so I didn't really know whether that was cheap or expensive. I then saw the more modern semi-detached 2-bed, which looks scruffy, but it's probably not as bad as it looks once you actually get everything out, all the clutter out and clean it up. Probably not too bad at 120. That made the 3-bed council property look very expensive, really. But then seeing the last one, a 3-bedroomed terraced house, really good size, nice garden, nicely done up with a modern kitchen, a modern bathroom, really ready to go. Once the tenant's gone, you've probably no refurb to do. Perhaps, cleaning carpets, there's probably maybe just a little bit of touch-up of paint here and there, but really ready to go. On the market at £120,000, and by the way, in a better location than the first 2 properties. So what point am I trying to make? Well, the point I'm trying to make is that if I had just gone through the details on Rightmove and just gone by the details on Rightmove, I would not have that insight. Now I know that if I were going to buy a property, I potentially would be buying a property nearer the one that's the 3-bed terraced, 120,000 all done up. Because for value for money, that area now seems very good indeed. In fact, that property, if somebody came to me and said, Peter, I'm not interested in the whole BRR refurbishing thing, I just want to buy a property, stick my cash in, get a 6 or 7% return, can you help me do that? That would be the sort of property which would work really, really well. But I would not have known that if I tried to do it all from the comfort and safety of my kitchen table. So this is the point. We cannot be so passive that we are completely passive. To be successful in property, you do have to get out there. You have to meet people. You have to go and view properties. You have to do stuff. And if at the moment you want to be in property and you're really struggling, challenge yourself. What are you doing? Are you actually going out and looking at properties? Are you meeting estate agents? Are you getting a feel for the market? Because it's when you start seeing properties and you start getting a feel for the market that you'll begin to build that gut feel, which will help you to be able to almost value properties instinctively. Now, it can take time to get to that point, but if you see enough properties and you think about those properties and you digest what you're seeing and thinking about, you will get to that point. So an encouragement to us all, we just need to keep doing. When you've got the property, then you can be passive. But until you get to the point where you've got the managing agents lined up, it's probably not that passive. But we have to work hard now in order not to work hard later. So just keep on going. I hope you found this video useful and informative. And if you did, then please come over to my website, www.thepropertyteacher.co.uk, where you'll find loads more great property related resources, including free special reports to download and my best-selling series of ebooks, which includes the Successful Property Renovators Workshop, 63 common defects in investment property and how to spot them. And if you're just starting out in property, or if you want to grow your portfolio, you may be particularly interested in the Successful Property Investors Strategy Workshop, in which I'll take you through exactly how I started and built my property portfolio, starting literally with none of my own money, and how I built a portfolio of £2 million worth of property in just 4 years. And that was starting from scratch. I'll take you through everything that I did right so that you can copy me and do the same. And I'll also show you everything that I did wrong so that you can avoid the mistakes that I made and so that you can progress in property and be far more successful, far more quickly than I ever was. And this is based upon my own real life experience, and it took me about 4 years to actually work out how to do property investing properly. But in the 200 pages in the Successful Property Investors Strategy Workshop, I'm going to show you all of that 4 years knowledge condensed down so that you can use it immediately. And until next time, here's to successful property investing.